Welcome, my dreamwalkers, to another journey into the twisted corners of the night. Tonight, we step into a world where laughter echoes, but it's not the kind that warms your heart. It's the kind that curdles your blood. Imagine a small town fair, alive with music, the scent of cotton candy, and the flicker of carnival lights, but lurking beneath the painted faces and cheerful chaos is a darkness waiting to erupt. In this tale, we meet a clown, a master of balloon animals and forced grins. But when the world stops laughing with him and starts laughing at him, his mask of paint becomes a mask of terror. So dim the lights, silence the world around you, and prepare yourself for a nightmare that will leave you questioning every painted smile you've ever seen. This is the Painted Smile. The annual Harvest Fair was the highlight of the year in Brookhaven, a small, picturesque town nestled in the valley. Families flocked to the fairgrounds to enjoy fried dough, spinning rides, and games rigged just enough to be frustrating. But for many, the real draw was Smiley the Clown. Smiley's real name, Gerald Weiler, was a fixture at the fair for over a decade. He was the epitome of joy, with his wide red grin painted carefully across his face and a talent for twisting balloons into impossibly intricate shapes. Children adored him, and even adults couldn't help but chuckle at his goofy antics. But behind the makeup and the painted smile was a man slowly unraveling. This year, something was different. Gerald's bookings were down. The fair organizers, Jake and Sophie, had slashed his pay, citing budget cuts. Kids had started mocking him, and their parents scrolled on their phones while he performed. Gerald felt invisible, an unwanted relic in a world that had moved on. It was Friday night when it happened. The fairgrounds were packed, neon lights reflecting off sticky puddles of spilled soda and half-eaten cotton candy. Gerald had been performing for hours, his face aching from the forced smile. He approached a group of teenagers near the Ferris wheel. "Who wants a balloon?" he asked in his exaggerated sing-song voice. One of the teens, a lanky boy with a backward cap, sneered. "Yeah, make me a noose, clown." The others burst out laughing. Gerald froze. His painted smile seemed to stretch wider as his eye twitched. "That's not funny, kid," he said softly, his voice wavering. But the boy wouldn't let up. "Oh, come on, Smiley, don't get all sad on us." He reached out and snapped one of Gerald's balloons, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Something inside Gerald broke. The scene exploded into chaos. Gerald lunged, his fingers gripping the boy's throat with surprising strength. The others screamed, scrambling away as the boy clawed at Gerald's hands. Fairgoers turned toward the commotion, and a few rushed forward to intervene, but Gerald released the boy and grabbed the nearest object, a twisted balloon animal, and began swinging it wildly. It wasn't the balloon that was dangerous. Inside his oversized clown jacket, Gerald pulled out a pair of scissors, long and sharp, once used to trim his balloon creations. Now they gleamed ominously in the glow of the midway lights. The first victim was a man who had tried to pull Gerald back. The scissors plunged into his side with a wet, sickening sound. Screams erupted, drowning out the carnival music, which continued to blare cheerfully, oblivious to the carnage. The fairgrounds erupted into pandemonium as Gerald's laughter echoed above the chaos, unnervingly jovial and dissonant with the carnage he was unleashing. He moved like a storm through the crowd, scissors glinting in the flickering lights. Children cried as parents scooped them up, fleeing toward the exits, while the workers abandoned their booths, some shouting for help, others frozen in terror. Near the carousel, a young woman tripped, spilling her popcorn as she glanced back at the clown bearing down on her. Gerald's painted smile had smeared, the once cheerful red now streaked with blood and sweat. His eyes, wide and unblinking, locked onto her as she scrambled backward. "Don't run," Gerald cooed, tilting his head like a predator toying with its prey. "The fun's just starting." The scissors arced down, but at the last second, a young man tackled Gerald from the side. They hit the ground hard, rolling through discarded cups and trampled corn dogs. The man screamed for others to help, but Gerald was eerily strong. With a guttural roar, he flipped his attacker over and plunged the scissors into his shoulder. The scissors came down in a jagged arc, slicing through the young man's jacket and grazing his shoulder. He let out a guttural cry, grabbing at the wound as blood seeped through his fingers. But he wasn't quick enough. Gerald, with a strength that seemed almost supernatural, wrenched him around like a rag doll and drove the blade deeper. The wet, sickening sound of flesh tearing filled the air, accompanied by the man's agonized screams. Gerald's laughter rang out, shrill and unhinged, as he twisted the scissors with deliberate cruelty. Blood sprayed across his white gloves and painted his already smeared face. "Oh, you're brave," he sneered, leaning close to the young man's ear. "But bravery doesn't last long, does it?" The man's knees buckled, his eyes rolling back as he gasped for air. He clawed weakly at Gerald's wrists, but the clown didn't falter. With a sudden, violent motion, Gerald pulled the scissors free, leaving a deep, ragged wound. Blood poured freely, pooling beneath the man as his body slumped to the ground. The crowd around him erupted into chaos, screams echoing over the garbled music still blaring from the speakers. People stumbled over one another in their frantic attempts to escape, knocking over booze and trampling forgotten prizes. Gerald stood in the center of the carnage, the crimson-streaked scissors hanging loosely at his side, his face a mask of madness. "Come now," Gerald shouted to the fleeing crowd, his voice booming over the chaos. "Don't leave the party early." Meanwhile, on the main stage, the ringmaster tried to take control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Security's on its way." But Gerald appeared from behind the curtain, scissors in hand, his smeared makeup transforming his face into a grotesque mask. The crowd screamed and surged toward the exits. "Security," Gerald mocked, his voice booming over the PA system as he grabbed the microphone. "The only thing coming tonight is me." He hurled the microphone, sparks flying as it hit the stage. Then he jumped down, disappearing into the throng. Gerald approached the fun house like a specter emerging from a nightmare. His blood-smeared shoes crunched on shards of broken glass and spilled popcorn, his movements eerily calm amid the chaos. The distant, terrified wails of fleeing fairgoers only seemed to embolden him. He paused at the funhouse entrance, his painted face illuminated by the flickering neon lights above the door. He tilted his head, listening intently. The faint sound of hurried footsteps and muffled sobs came from within. A twisted grin spread across his face as he twirled the scissors between his fingers, the blades glinting menacingly. "I do love hide and seek," he muttered, stepping inside. Inside, the funhouse distorted reality into a chaotic maze of warped reflections and disorienting lights. Gerald moved through the halls with unrelenting precision, his predatory instinct sharp. He dragged the scissors lightly along the mirrors, the shrill, grating sound echoing like a death knell. "Jake," he called out in a sing-song voice, his tone playful but dripping with malice. "Sophie, don't be shy. Let's have one last laugh together." The couple's hurried breaths reached his ears, their desperation deliciously tangible. He followed the sound, his pace steady, his confidence unshaken. Sophie and Jake had backed themselves into a corner, the distorted mirrors turning their fear into grotesque caricatures. They held each other tightly, Sophie sobbing quietly into Jake's chest. "We need to move," Jake whispered, his voice strained. But before they could act, Gerald's reflection appeared in every mirror around them, his grin stretching wider than seemed possible. Now, he cooed. "Leaving so soon?" Jake lunged forward, swinging a shard of broken mirror he had grabbed in desperation. Gerald sidestepped easily, the shard slicing through empty air. With a swift motion, he plunged his scissors into Jake's side, the blade sinking in with a sickening squelch. Jake cried out, collapsing to his knees, blood pooling around him. Sophie screamed, scrambling backward, but Gerald was upon her in an instant. He grabbed her by the wrist, his grip iron-like. "Oh, don't worry," he whispered, his breath warm and rancid against her ear. "You'll join him soon enough." The funhouse fell silent. Moments later, its mirrors splattered with crimson, their warped reflections a grim tableau of carnage. Gerald stepped out of the funhouse into the now abandoned fairgrounds. The midway was a graveyard of overturned booths and discarded prizes, eerily quiet except for the faint buzz of flickering lights. His once vibrant costume was soaked in blood, his makeup smeared into a grotesque mask. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. He didn't panic. Instead, he calmly walked toward the Ferris wheel, its shadow looming like a sentinel in the moonlight. He stopped at a carousel horse toppled on its side, crouching down to stroke its painted mane with a bloodied hand. "Such a wonderful night," he murmured to himself, his voice dreamy. The headlights of approaching police cars cast long, eerie shadows. Gerald stood, his eyes glinting in the light, and disappeared into the maze of rides and booths. By the time officers arrived, he was gone, leaving only the blood-stained funhouse and the haunting echoes of his laughter. Weeks later, the fairgrounds were still cordoned off, the remnants of the massacre drawing thrill-seekers and ghost hunters alike. The funhouse became a local legend, a place no one dared to enter. They never found Gerald. Some say he vanished into the woods, while others believe he joined another traveling fair, waiting for his next act. On quiet nights near abandoned fairgrounds across the state, people swear they can hear the faint hum of carnival music and the distant chilling sound of a clown's laughter. And somewhere, in the shadowy corners of a forgotten tent, Gerald sharpens his scissors, his painted smile, ready for the next performance. As the fairgrounds fall silent and the painted horrors fade into shadow, we turn now to a tale sent in by one of you, our cherished dreamers. It's a personal account, whispered from the dim corners of memory, and it's just as unsettling. This next story will grip you with hands unseen. Let's dive into what we'll now call just that, the hands unseen. The small group of friends, Ethan, Rachel, Mark, and Lily, were thrill seekers in their final year of high school, always chasing the next rush. Ethan had heard about the old McAllister house from a senior who swore it was haunted. The story was the usual fare. At midnight, a ghostly woman would appear at the top of the stairs, or, if you were truly unlucky, you'd see a severed head rolling down them. It was ridiculous, of course, but the perfect setup for a Friday night adventure. By dusk, the four of them piled into Ethan's old sedan, the faint smell of gasoline and pine air freshener lingering in the air. The drive to the house was uneventful, full of nervous laughter and exaggerated impressions of the ghostly woman they were supposed to see. The house loomed at the end of a long gravel driveway, silhouetted by the dying light. It was every bit as creepy as they'd imagined. The wooden frames sagged under decades of neglect, windows dark and yawning like hollow eyes. Rachel shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. "This place looks like it's holding together by spite," she muttered. "Perfect," Ethan said, grinning as he pulled a flashlight from the trunk. Inside, the house was damp and smelled of rot. The floorboards groaned beneath their weight, and their footsteps echoed ominously. Mark waved his flashlight dramatically, casting jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper. "Behold," he declared, "the domain of the ghostly lady." They spent hours wandering through the decaying rooms, laughing, poking at old furniture, and daring each other to go into the basement. Midnight came and went without so much as a creak from the stairs. The house was just that, a rotting shell with no secrets to give up. "Guess the ghost clocked out early," Mark joked as they finally decided to leave. It was nearly 2 a.m. when they stumbled out into the crisp night air. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as they approached Ethan's car, their laughter dissolving into quiet exhaustion. But as they reached the car, Rachel froze. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze to the car's windows, now covered in dozens of smeared handprints. At first, they all laughed nervously, assuming it was some elaborate prank by the same kids who'd told them about the house. But as they drew closer, the humor drained from their faces. The handprints weren't made of mud, they were a deep, rust-colored red. "Is that blood?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. No one answered. Ethan yanked the driver's side door open. "Get in," he barked, his usual confidence replaced with a sharp edge of fear. The car tore down the gravel road, the headlights bouncing wildly as Ethan floored the gas pedal. Inside, the air was tense, their earlier laughter replaced by stunned silence. "That had to be a prank, right?" Mark said, though he didn't sound convinced. Before anyone could respond, Ethan's body jerked violently back against his seat. His hands flew off the steering wheel, clutching at his throat as if an invisible force were choking him. His eyes bulged, his mouth open in a silent scream. "Ethan, what's happening?" Rachel shrieked, reaching for him, but Lily grabbed her arm, stopping her. Mark lunged forward from the back seat, grabbing the wheel as the car swerved dangerously close to the edge of the gravel road. "I've got it," he yelled, trying to keep the car steady. Ethan's gasps were strangled, his fingers clawing at his neck. His face turned a terrifying shade of red. The car was careening wildly now, bouncing over potholes and kicking up dust. Mark spotted the faint outline of a church sign, illuminated by the headlights, and yanked the wheel sharply to the right. The tires screeched as they hit the parking lot, skidding to a halt in a spray of gravel. The car's engine sputtered and died, and everything went silent. Ethan doubled over in his seat, coughing and gasping for air. His face was pale, his shirt soaked in sweat. "What the hell was that?" he rasped. No one answered. The church loomed over them, its white steeple stark against the black sky. A strange calm settled over the group, as if the grounds themselves were a refuge from whatever had gripped Ethan. Mark stared out the windshield, his knuckles white from gripping the wheel. "We're not going back there," he said firmly. The others nodded silently. As they sat there, trying to catch their breath, they noticed something strange. The bloody handprints on the car windows were gone, but in the quiet of the church parking lot, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, just beyond the reach of the headlights. Thank you for joining me in tonight's tale of fear and fascination. I hope you enjoyed the eerie world of the painted smile and the unseen hands that reach for you in the dark. If you want to hear more stories that send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with what you'd like Mr. Sandman to bring you next. After all, your nightmares are my inspiration. Feel free to tell me what tales you crave, and I'll make them a reality just for you. Now take a deep breath, let the world fade away, and settle into the sounds of a gentle storm. Relax and let the rain wash your worries away until we meet again in the dark.